You had 3 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
I was only doing this for you. I loved you, Andy.
Yeah, whatever.
Welcome to No Club. I'm Chad Rowan.
I'm JJ Artemis.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're talking about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which was released in 2007 for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. And it was developed by Infinity Ward, published by Activision. Which, of course, became a really nonsensical debate about when Infinity Ward started making Call of Duty games, and then that other studio,
Treyarch?
yeah, started making the other series of them.
Yeah.
And they're like, which ones are better? And everyone's like, who cares? We're just going to end up buying all of them anyway.
You already know this, though, because this game is the most famous video game of the past, decade. It completely redefined the entire space that we lived in for, a console generation and a half, and is only just now maybe being usurped by, Fortnite. Maybe. and that's
Not
it.
Minecraft?
No. Minecraft was always its own bubble. There wasn't enough attempts to copy it immediately because
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. But this, we're getting into the topmost layer of the big milk jug that is video games. We're really skimming the skim. Do they call it skim at the top of the milk? The weird fat layer?
That's the cream.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're getting into
That's called, the act of removing that is skimming it.
Oh, gotcha. Verbs. Cool.
So really, skim milk should be called skimmed milk. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. But yeah, we are now getting at the layer of video games that everyone has seen, including your mother.
Right.
Yeah.
Hilariously, as far as I know, not any of us, though.
Right, yeah, this, the effect that this game had on the video game industry is, a big reason why I barely played any video games for, 8 years.
Yeah. That is moderately fair. That is modern warfare-ly fair. Because... Actually, the pun there spun into ferret, which is not where I wanted to go. I'm going to eject that pun.
Yeah.
Bad pun.
I'm going to let you finish. And then just instead of having to do any of that pun stuff, I'll recover instead. I'd say, I played this game when it came out. And I don't know if either of you guys knew about this.
No, I did not know that you played it.
No. My dad loves and supports me. So he bought me a 360. And what he assumes video games are. And at the time... that was Halo 3, even though I never owned an Xbox and thus never played a Halo game before.
Right.
And Call of Duty 4 and some other associated video game accoutrement.
Right. I feel like this is the point, actually, because I want to talk about that, just the impact that this game had on, the gaming public at large, I guess, to say, in comparison to something like Halo. But I do want to open with the disclaimer that because this game is old, 11 years old, in fact, we did not play the multiplayer. I have to imagine that even attempting to play the multiplayer would be something just short of a nightmare. I feel like you would end up with, the thing that happens to fighting games in 2 weeks after they come out, where the only people who are still playing Modern Warfare are, either cheating or literally the best people at Modern Warfare. So that part, because the multiplayer of this game is really what put it in the zeitgeist, far more than it as a game ever did. Because as far as because I've played Call of Duty and Call of Duty 2, and then I skipped 3 and 4, and I played Black Ops when it came out. So there are probably a dozen or so of these games that I haven't played. But as far as I know, 4 was the first one that actually had multiplayer.
They had multiplayer in the old ones, but most Xbox era multiplayer games, it was multiplayer. It was really stretching before the era when you can have that kind of connectivity and those kind of consistent matchmaking and positive experiences where you didn't have to have a separate phone line or weird things to connect to other weird things.
Right.
Yeah. It was consistent. and really set the tone early for what we now understand as like the modern multiplayer grinding experience. It was one of the early, and certainly one of the first popular early multiplayer games where you had a progression system that was tied to it that just made you kind of demonstrably better than other players, but it was a subtle enough progression system that you didn't just blow through everyone that was around you.
Right.
It's like Splatoon. Like, you give benefits and thus give players goals that they can work toward in the multiplayer other than just the fun of the individual games. But those goals, the game has a time to kill it of like half a second or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, if you give the jump on someone, it doesn't matter if they can run faster than you.
Yeah. So this is stupid, but the comparison that I drew when playing this game, speaking of there being like a minuscule time to kill, I played a lot of Counter-Strike, specifically Counter-Strike Source, which means I was part of the baby generation of people who didn't play real Counter-Strike. But within Counter-Strike Source, when I purchased that game, it also came with Counter-Strike 1.6 and a game called Counter-Strike Condition Zero, which, if you aren't aware of CZ, it was I believe, Gearbox-developed single-player mod for Counter-Strike that got sort of picked up by Valve and distributed as a retail thing. And it, like, you can feel the seeds of what would become the Modern Warfare campaign in a game like that came out like several years prior, where it is just like the fragility of life is what is on display in this game. And I don't think they do a particularly good job of emphasizing that in a way that can make like a legitimate statement. I do think that it makes the gameplay frenetic enough and like your accuracy matter enough that it scratches a certain itch as far as a single player first person shooter goes.
Yeah. And that, in the multiplayer, the itch that gets scratched is speed. It's an itch where every game is really fast, everything you're doing is really fast, the downtime when you lose is very low, and anyone's the chance against anyone, because if you manage to, if you're just in the right place at the right time, just like actual war, then, you can get that kill off, even whether you're low or high skilled. And while that drapes the ceiling a little bit, it gave them the freedom and the mechanics to also have all of these other snowballing kill streak mechanics and benefits and all the other perks that we talked about before. And
basically the things that invented the montage highlight reel.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And in the single player, I find this game's turning point relationship both in how it changed from the previous Call of Duty games, of which I played like 3 or 4 when I was a youngin' man, from how it twisted that kind of like almost memorialized, this is for the soldiers kind of tone into Modern Warfare, and then the impact that had when it exploded after it tried to like grab that aesthetic instead of the self-serious aesthetic.
Yeah.
That's the reason I wanted to talk about this. I think specifically that Modern Warfare, the legacy that it created through the rest of the game industry has kind of tainted it a little bit in retrospect. For example, I think in the single-player campaign, I think the game makes some actually like interesting points about war. I don't think Modern Warfare particularly likes war, kind of like the older Call of Duties that came before it.
Right.
That's what it kind of took me by surprise, because I got that vibe as well. Like the first mission on the boat, you go in and the NPCs do a lot of the like shooting like for you, like because you're just kind of following them all along. And one of the first things that happens is you go into a bunk and just shoot 2 sleeping soldiers in the head. Yeah. And it's just like, oh. Like, I don't know why I'm surprised by this, but I am. It just depicts it like very realistically and doesn't really kind of like take a slant on it, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of levels that I want to call out specifically. because for the most part, the game says, well, the thing that I think Call of Duty 4 wants to say about war is that death sucks, dying is bad, but lots of things that happen are cool, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's sort of a dichotomy there, and the issue that I have is that someone at Infinity Ward, I don't know who they are, but I wish them all the best going forward, knows what subtlety is, and knows how to, like, craft an interesting, not narrative, but like a play experience that is actually that doesn't rely on set pieces and doesn't rely on this like breakneck like shoot, like aim and shoot action, which I assume because I played the game on PC was just statistically way easier for me than it was intended to be. But yeah, God, there's some stuff in here that feels like it's so... it feels like it wants to make that statement about it not liking war. Yeah. But then it also feels like there's lots of stuff in here that makes me want to go like, war's the dopest thing I've ever seen.
It's the game praises the aesthetic of war, the aesthetic of like modern combat and like milsim tactical people,
right?
And completely buy into that, mostly from a marketing perspective, so you can pull in the kind of people who will see red dot sites and be like, oh, that's fucking sweet. But the game makes the really good decision of giving off that impression that it doesn't actually have a particularly positive opinion of these kind of conflicts by choosing what to focus on, but not commenting on what it's focusing on at all. Mm-hmm. And it works really well within the set piece structure that this game really started to push forward from the other Call of Duties. Like when
can we address the elephant in the room then, which is death from above?
Yeah.
I feel like this is like almost, to me, is like the landmark level of the game, especially in this sort of like in the read of this where it does want to make a statement and it doesn't want to be like a purely neutral entity.
Yeah,
Death from Above is not a difficult level. It's not hard to complete it. There isn't a whole lot really going on, and everything is very straight-laced. People aren't yelling for the first time in the whole game.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like it feels terrible to play.
It's almost like they're too calm. Like everyone around you, the other audio that you hear going through the level is just people just be like,
yeah, like boom, kaboom is what the guy says over and over again.
Yeah, like as if this is like you've taken a boots on the ground crazy war situation where everyone's yelling and everything's frantic in all the other levels, and then you've moved it up to like two guys eating nachos and just like ending lives.
Yeah. Like totally casually.
Yeah.
Then another one for the highlight reel. Like that whole scene, and that shit, like that'll fuck you up. And that's such a good level because of it. This is what I was talking about when I'm talking about somebody knowing something about subtlety. This level is exactly that. And I loved it. It was the Spec Ops The Line of Call of Duty 4 levels.
Yeah, like it's almost like a documentary in some ways. Not obviously very not realistic war in many ways, but what I mean by that, it's documentary like in the way it tries to present its message by just displaying selective facts and not about like having significant commentary on those facts.
Yeah. One thing that I found really effective is that they like put you in a squad and give you a captain who like calls out orders. Like it almost kind of feels like a simulation in that way.
Right.
Where like I'm like going behind him and I'm like, yeah, I'm like waiting for him to tell me what to do, and I'm like, this is tense. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I just have to trust this guy.
Yeah, and for the most part, if you step out of line, you well, either you're just dawdling and and nothing happens, or in like the more extreme circumstances, if he tells you to do something and you don't do it, you'll just die and have to go back to the checkpoint.
Yeah. That was really effective to me.
Other effective moments? Obviously the nuke scene, which I feel like has also been a little bit forgotten in popular like discourse about the game.
It's because Call of Duty has amped that up like 1,000 times since the initial release of this game. Like every single Call of Duty has had a higher and higher stakes moment to the point where in Modern Warfare 2, they literally gave you the option to skip a level because they presumed it might be too traumatic for people.
What happened in it?
It's No Russian, if you've heard that thrown around. It's a level where your character is undercover and you go through an airport and just murder unarmed civilians.
I've seen this.
Yeah. And it did cause controversy, but I feel like it was manufactured controversy.
Of course it was.
Yeah. But, that was their big thing. Plus, I think they detonated a nuke in 2 as well.
But the nuke scene in 1 isn't...
But it was 2 nukes.
Oh my god.
Modern Warfare 2, and nukes with a C.
Whatever. But the nuke scene in 1 isn't unlike No Russian and lots of the other bullshit that they kept doing in order to have better marketing reels after they wanted to continue making all the money in the world, repeating this kind of magic of this game. The nuke scene has a point in 1. The nuke scene isn't just there to be like, oh shit, oh no, nuclear, oh god, an explosion.
Right.
Like, it's set up in a context in the story where it was completely avoidable and totally your fault that it happened.
Yes.
And it's set up in such a way where the shock is from how disempowered you are instantaneously and suddenly compared to your entire experience through the rest of the game. Like, in No Russian, you're under no threat whatsoever and you're just murdering people just because, I don't know. I don't even know what message that's supposed to send, frankly. But
there's no subtlety in that.
Yeah. But in the nuke scene in the original Modern Warfare, it's like it happens in a moment where you're assuming that you're about to be triumphant, that you've saved the day as a stereotypical American interventionist hero, and then you literally get blown out of the sky, and everything around you is dust.
Right. Well, I don't actually. I may not have followed the plot of the game enough to realize this.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong. But the nuke detonation is not actually specifically your fault. Just the fact that you died and everyone else on your squad dies.
It was
because you go leave no man behind. Go back for the helicopter pilot, and you're like, but why though?
You knew in the story you knew that they had nukes when they were going in, and that was the threat. It's you need to be an elite soldier and take out this thing precisely, or there'll be nuclear retaliation.
Right? Yeah.
And
you were aware of the danger, and then you just make a bad decision.
Yeah, you're aware of the danger, and you're like, I'm cool enough to do it anyway. And then the level ends telling you that you were wrong. And,
right.
Yeah. With large geopolitical consequences. Yeah, nothing held against you for not really following the story of this game, because it's entirely presented in dossiers between the fights that you don't have to pay attention to.
I wasn't reading them. I actually didn't realize until the 5th level that there was plot specific text.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one that I caught was the one where it was just telling me the rounds per minute of the different machine guns on the helicopters, and I was like, oh, this is just bullshit I don't care about. And then later I was like, wait, that's a name. I recognize that name. Mm-hmm. And so I goofed a bit on that, but
it sounds slightly Russian-y. Yeah.
Well, to kind of segue this into something else, we've talked about the fact that this game's ludicrously popular.
Yeah.
And we were talking about these things about it that we like.
Yeah.
But I don't know this. I've avoided Call of Duty pretty effectively my whole life.
Yeah.
But were those the people who really like this game care at all about that stuff?
No.
Or do they just like the multiplayer?
Some people do.
Or Yeah.
From the discourse that I've heard, actually, the first thing that I ever heard about this game...
I was like, was that one of the things that made it popular, I guess, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, one of the first things that I ever heard about this game had nothing to do with the multiplayer, and at the time I didn't even realize that there was multiplayer in the game. Given the time that this took place, I did own, a 360, but, my shooter games went about as far as like Halo 3, and I was too busy blistering my own fingers trying to become the world's greatest rock band player. But the first thing anyone told me about it was the mission where you play as what is his name? Price?
Gilly Man? Is that
Yeah.
Okay.
The with all gillied up.
Yeah.
But not that one. Yep, I don't know. I thought I had written down his name. I didn't write down his name. But yeah, the like your commander throughout the whole game. There's a flashback sequence, and the mission that I was told about was one shot, one kill.
Yeah.
The one where you have to like aim a rifle and take into account the Coriolis effect at this distance is you just have to watch a flag and then shoot and hope that you guessed right. It's not like impossibly difficult, but the implication of the mission puts so much on the player's shoulders to just be like, figure this out, dummy. And I'm like, oh god, all I know is hit scan. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. But that's what it was described to me, and I don't know. I know people do like these campaigns. I know people who only play the campaigns.
What you have to remember, Andy, is that when this game came out, there was zero expectation that Call of Duty was a multiplayer franchise. Like, none.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah. It was coming from a pedigree of games in which the single player, like, switching between perspectives in an international conflict was, like, what the game was about, and making these, like, cool, semi-realistic, somber presentations of war and glory and all that. So
with inspirational quotes and grenade indicators.
So it was after this point, like, it was after the game came out when multiplayer being related to Call of Duty became a thing whatsoever. Like, it was in like very little of the marketing in terms of trying to push that angle. This game was all about the presentation and the tone, because that's what was unique about it. It was as far as I'm aware, the first like huge big budget attempt to really appeal to like milsim crowd in any aesthetic way at like a AAA level. Even like Counter-Strike this is one thing I always found strange about Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
Why is Counter-Strike's aesthetic like SWAT teams and not the military? It's like the police, like even in the old ones.
Yeah, no, and they don't even like the counter-terrorist teams or whatever. Are like none of their outfits ever were like even vaguely military. They had like the weird face masks and like the bulletproof vests with bright blue on them.
Yeah, it feels very Tom Clancy.
Yeah.
I think it was just for ease of recognition, so you didn't think one person was another. And honestly, I think Counter-Strike Source has done it best through the whole series.
Maybe the people working on the game just think SWAT teams are super cool.
Yeah, it's totally possible. Yeah. Because military sims as a genre have existed for a long time, like as like niche PC games. I feel like people who were into those games would fucking hate this game. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't make a whole ton of sense most of the time from that perspective, but it does definitely like have that aesthetic that I think people find intriguing about milsims.
Yeah, sleekness. Like, I don't. God, there's just something sexy about black squared aluminum a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. You know.
I don't know. It really just gets deep into you, black squared aluminum. I can't describe it. It might just be like a weird cultural ingrained thing that like 100 years from now people are going to look back and was like, the United States buried this into your psyche, like you're being damaged forever. But I don't know. Like I can like look at a gun with some sweet shit and be like, oh man, that shit's pretty sweet.
Well, we also have to like. So this is another thing where, like, a level of because of the console this came out on, right? Like, it was predominantly successful on the console, like within the console market, and and especially in the Xbox 360 was targeted at basically these young men, and the amount of weapon fetishism present in this game is like, I mean, it's not like absurd, like it's not the most crazy that I've ever seen.
No.
But they took a lot of care to make sure the weapons were like modeled accurately, and more importantly, they never get a fucking scratch on them. Like, they're flawless weapons from the moment you pick them up. Whereas, like, if you compare it to something like say GoldenEye, right? Where the weapons were designed in a way that is specific and they're functional and they're there to fulfill a mechanical purpose. And then look at something like Far Cry 2, where the weapons are specifically designed to look like shit. So that you know when you pick it up that the weapon could be garbage and ruin your run. So when you compare like the aesthetics of the three games, Modern Warfare is the one that clearly said like, we love these guns. Please check out these cool guns.
Check out my guns.
Check out
guns
these guns.
are sweet.
Do you have your tickets to the gun show hosted by Infinity Ward?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really great way for them to have their cake and eat it too, and in some ways even kind of really subtly try and present these kind of like this anti-war post 9/11 sort of discomfort with the whole situation to exactly the audience that you kind of want to present that to.
Fair.
Yeah, like I think they did a relatively good job in that respect. The problem was that after this point, the amount of money that they made from doing that made them realize that appealing to that market was way more important than kind of like subtle, abstract, artistic messages about war.
Right.
And we're just like, oh man, how can we put more guns in this? How can we get more people who care about guns to put more time into this thing that's full of guns?
Well, that was always because prior to the like Infinity Ward split, the primary competitor with Call of Duty was Medal of Honor.
Yeah.
And they're hilariously similar games to the point where it's almost difficult to tell which game you were playing when playing one of the two games, like pre-2007.
Yep.
And, like, obviously, like, taking it to Modern Warfare it made this game explode, and I feel like probably a lot of people who were born, like, in the very late 90s or in the early 2000s, probably do know about Call of Duty, and probably maybe have even played Modern Warfare, probably don't know what Medal of Honor is.
Yeah.
Like, this game just eclipsed it, even though they had exactly the same tone and message and everything prior to this game existing. They really nailed the marketing for this entry. No zombies, though.
COD.
COD? COD zombies?
COD zombies.
Hell yeah!
What a turn to the dark side, man. Not that it was very light to begin with. It's not like a turn from light to dark. It's a turn from like neutral,
brown,
like neutral good to brown to dark. It's fine.
I mean that's arguably true. I mean, to further emphasize the point, the fact that one of the like Splinter series of this game was called Black Ops, and then there was Ghosts. I don't know if that one's like Black Ops related.
One of them's in Vietnam. I think Ghosts is the one that's set in like an alternate future where like the Nazis like won and took over part of the U.S.
This is what I love. I actually, because I've been pushing to do Modern Warfare for like 3 years. Like, I wanted to do this for the podcast really badly.
I wonder who was resisting that one.
But like literally since that decision where I was like, I want to do Modern Warfare because it was like an influential game.
Yeah.
I so want to play the campaigns of like Infinite Warfare, where you go to goddamn space and like like alternate future Nazi Call of Duty. Like, when this game goes crazy, I don't even know what it would be like.
Like, why don't you just like...
It's like if you turned on an episode of The Golden Girls and like somebody stepped out of a portal and was just like, we gotta go, and like for some reason this thing that you totally thought you had nailed down became like an action thriller.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense to me that these exist, but I love it.
Yeah.
Like, I love its existence. I might hate the game.
Can't you just save yourself some time and just like watch Transformers 4?
How many of those movies are there?
At least
there's
4.
5 of them, I think.
I don't know.
Oh no.
I think
the
they're done
4th
now.
one was the one with the Dinobots, and then the 5th one was the one that just came out like last year, I
That
think.
has no distinguishing features we're aware of.
It was based on like an arc from the cartoon people liked. They keep doing like just like something to get people mildly interested.
Because that's what you need to get people to watch a Transformers
Yeah,
movie.
apparently.
Yeah.
I'm curious, actually. Okay, hold on.
Yes?
Because this game is predominantly a mechanical exercise,
Yes.
I feel like we could probably get a somewhat meaty conversation out of that
Yeah, I agree.
on the return from the break.
I agree.
Are there things related to narrative that we want to mention at all before? How did the intro scene with you in the car, so not like the actual intro, but like that mid-intro?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, play out for you guys. Like, because I knew about it before, and so it kind of like damaged my actual perception of it while playing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I always did think it was a good concept that they put your character in a car and then you just get shot immediately as you like slowly figure out who you are and why you're doing the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was excellent.
I agree. It was a way for them, because this was the first Call of Duty where they were trying to push something resembling a narrative that players either couldn't ignore or weren't already aware of. Like, what I mean by that is in all the previous games, when they were dealing with World War II, they were dealing with different fronts of World War II and switching back and forth between them.
Right.
And literally everyone knows the story of World War II. Like, it's actually, like, taught to us by the government. Like, we were put into rooms and we were told that story. But in this game, they actually had to try and create different geopolitical states since they were going into the modern day. They had to make up new countries. They had to go further and actually kind of branch out in terms of the writing for the game. So they had to think of ways where they could, within the context of a first-person shooter, where they could force someone to care about a geopolitical narrative. Because most shooter games, when you're forced into a first-person perspective, are pretty personal experiences. Like, probably the most famous narrative-related shooter, Half-Life, is a game that's mostly about, like, people in spaces. Like, there are lots of individual actors and a lot of good tone setting, but, like, you don't go into Half-Life and attempt to tell a story about, like, the Combine's, like, movements of troops across a particular, like, nation state.
Right.
But that's what they had to do if they wanted to reflect modern warfare.
Yeah.
So they did this opening scene, which forced you into an on-the-ground perspective. Like, you are the person who was killed. Like, it forces you to care about these kind of abstract things that for most people in real life kind of just fall into the background noise of the news, like all international news. So they were like, how do we make you care? Why don't we shoot you in the face? Okay, yeah, that's a good way to force things up. And you're going through the car, and like you can look left and right, and you can see all the horrors being committed. It was a pretty good solution to a pretty hard problem. So I do like that scene.
Yeah, I also knew about the scene ahead of time because this game's like almost 10 years old.
It's 11 years old.
I mean, it is over 10 years old.
Yeah.
But I do think it is effective. Like, it establishes that the fact that the game's not pro-war, I think, pretty well.
Yeah.
And it goes on just long enough for it to kind of wave over you, like, what's going on. So I think it's pretty effective. And I just kind of appreciated the amount of like effort that went into like the set pieces in the narrative. Like, there was a lot more emphasis on that than I expected.
Yeah.
Can we give them praise on the one thing that they have always done good, including in the bad games that exist now?
Right.
Which is just the artistic design of, like, shelled out, destroyed spaces. Like, they're so pretty. Like, so, like, the game... How old is this game? This
11
game
years old.
is so...
Third time it's
Like, everything in this game is still so pretty. They make, like... everyone makes fun of like the browns and the grays of modern destroyed atmosphere, like the Gears of War color palette that last console generation kind of overtook so many things. But this game really has like a selective use of color that bridges the gap between realistic depiction and just like pure photography perfection. That I like, it's so good. The screenshots of this game are so good, and the way that, because it's so linear, the way that you're forcibly framed into these three-dimensional spaces that are all active and moving independently of you. Like, I have nothing for praise about the set design of where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, I would I think it's more just like a personal preference thing, but push back against that a little. I think what's really strong is the level design, I think they take that kind of limited concept of like Afghanistan city streets and like actually make some interesting like levels out of it. And obviously the art is like, art direction's done by actual artists and is competent and good, but like I find it very visually uninteresting and would not describe it as pretty in any way, personally.
There are so many shifts, though. Like
it's true. There was more variety than I expected, but
I just watched you go through the like night vision crazy line level.
Right.
Like, it's a great example of what I'm talking about, where they're depicting something real that all of us have a touchstone for in terms of watching like military footage. But it has tons of visual flash, looks cool, is still functional in gameplay thanks to those little lasered lines, whatever they are. I don't know if they have names. I bet they have names.
Lazy sight or something like that?
Whatever, something. And then, they married functionality and gameplay, variety and palette, and realistic depiction of what they're trying to show in some approximation of realism.
Yeah, I mean, they do a lot with what they have, for sure. Yeah. But I don't know.
Yeah, that the approximation of realism is really, because I think, I'm trying not to go off too far from topic, but I agree that they do a good job with the Middle Eastern city bombed out atmosphere, because it's the type of thing that has like taken hold so much. As a cultural thing, especially on that 360 era, it's something that you see a ton, and they obviously put a lot of care into making it good, whereas people who were trying to sort of siphon off players from this game just did it again.
Yeah.
And they probably didn't put as much care into it. The only game that I would like to call out for doing an arguably even better job of it is Serious Sam 3.
Oh, come on.
Which has literally a level at the beginning that is supposed to be like a parody of Modern Warfare. And because the first weapons you get are like a pistol and you can aim down the sights and like an assault rifle. And then at some point an alien mothership just like rolls over and dumps like 1,000 monsters on you, and you pick up a rocket launcher that doesn't have to reload, and it goes like, yo, fuck that game! And then you just like blow everything up and you're like, yeah, you rip guys' eyeballs out. It's weird. But they took the attention to detail in creating that opening city is just fucking incredible. Mm-hmm. And it was only like 2 years after this game came out, so.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. I agree with what you said.
I also agree. Agreement is found.
Commencing break.
Is that what our theme song would sound like if it existed and then was reversed?
Yeah.
Well, now we have to reverse it. See what that sounds like.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. Here we go. Here's what it sounds like.
Hot off the heels of Call of Duty 2. The Infinity Ward team has been developing Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. We're making a more sophisticated, deeper Call of Duty experience. Variety is the next big thing for us. We're going deep, and we're going hard.
The weak man may be careful not to soil himself when he plays this game.
In the mind and time, you'll find my lines combining the twine.
What was Hulk Hogan's alter ego character?
Oh, Mr. America?
Mr. America. I want him on that.
There's a whole thing in professional wrestling where Hulk Hogan was like banned from WWE, but like not really, but really, but not really.
Banned.
Yeah,
In the script.
and so a new wrestler entered the fray by the name of Mr. America, who wore a mask that covered approximately 0% of his face, and it was just fucking Hulk Hogan the whole time. And there's this amazing clip of Ed McMahon giving him a lie detector test. And I'm like, "Are you Hulk Hogan?" And he's just like, "Fuck you!" And it's like, not a lie. Like him just getting progressively angrier. And then they make some dick jokes, and it's really good. I love professional wrestling. I hate professional wrestling, but I hate and love it a lot.
I want to know how long they kept that going. It's like...
It was more than a year.
Yeah, it's so goofy.
I feel like a conversation about professional wrestling is the perfect way to tell everybody, welcome back to talking about Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. The professional wrestling of video games.
Indeed.
So, as we alluded to before, I think that our discussion of the themes and the tone and the story of this game have largely concluded, and we're moving on to what most people probably remember about the game, which is shooting guys. So, I have a couple of notes that are incredibly pedantic about the mechanics, that I'm sure that I'll bring up in a way that is not jarring at all.
Good.
But at its heart, this game is a first-person shooter of the sort before, like, cover shooters and like third-person mechanics really took hold in the genre.
Yeah, or really anything to make movement and traversal interesting at all.
Right.
Yeah.
It feels its lineage can be traced back to a Doom, and whereas like other like big shooters at the time, things like Gears of War really cannot. It also has that infuriatingly weird 2-weapon limit thing, which I feel like I don't understand where... Like, I understand kind of where it comes from a balancing perspective, but then there are things in this game, like the Javelin, that I don't understand why they don't just let you take it as a third weapon, because it's used in such specific situations, and then as soon as you're done with it, you have to, like, scramble to find a weapon on the ground, and I really hated that.
Conservation of UI. Correct me if I'm wrong here, because this is one of those things where there could just be like some crazy niche, super early example that I don't know of. I think the weapon wheel didn't exist at the time COD 4 was made. Like, I literally, unless I'm vastly mistaken here, I don't think anyone had come up with the solution yet of, like, how do you let people on a console quickly switch between multiple options in a list, like, in gameplay?
That feels like it can't be right, though.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
It feels eternal, but I can't think of an example.
Like, because this came out in 2007, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about... None of the Halos had that?
Nope.
Yeah, Halo's had a 2-weapon limit as well.
Because that was the limitation of the 2 weapons. Not only was it you didn't have to create any kind of UI for it if you just have a one weapon switch button. It allowed everyone immediately to have control over exactly the weapon they needed to.
You said weapon wheel, and for some reason it made me think of Twilight Princess, which has a item wheel. That's where they got the idea from, because that came out in 2006.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and that actually, as far as I'm concerned, that counts. As far as like a predecessor, it's not as specific, so I'll also let your point slide. The thing that came to mind for me was Metal Gear Solid, which has its like L-shaped menus. It's not as intuitive as a weapon wheel would be.
No.
But it is that solution where Solid Snake inexplicably carries 3,000 weapons on him at one time, and you can just sort of cycle between them.
Yeah. But that kind of solution requires way too much mental processing power for the audience and the tone that this game was going for.
Was this primarily designed as a console game?
It almost assuredly was, yeah.
Okay, yeah, though then that makes sense. Because on a keyboard you wouldn't have the issue.
At launch, I don't think PC existed at launch for this game. I think it was ported over later.
If it was not long after. The Wikipedia article states all three came out in 2007.
Yeah, I
and
think
in November, in fact. So if
okay.
if that was the case, then it would have had to have been within a
Fine,
month.
Wikipedia. But yeah, this was like most of the CODs primarily designed for console games. Medal of Honor was more PCE, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Medal of Honor is extremely a PC game, and I think won a lot of people over in its earlier installments over the Call of Duty series specifically because of that, because the PC was just where you went for shooters. Unless you owned a N64 and then you played just GoldenEye, and that's the only one.
In a rare moment of no clip awareness, we were doing the exact podcast thing where we're like, oh, let's speculate about demonstrable facts anyone can look up.
I mean, if the demonstrable fact that we're speculating on is, was there no weapon wheel?
Yeah.
I think that is just incorrect. I feel like there's no way that some iteration of the weapon wheel did not exist.
I'm going to Google this. There's got to be is there like a weepon wheel on
The weapon wheel wiki.
The wheel wiki?
www.www.com.
God. Okay. I will continue finding. There's a podcast called Weapon Wheel, which I'm sure is full
pretty
of
good
cool
name.
people.
That's a real good name. Go listen to Weapon Wheel. Stop listening to us. Give us a 0-star
But what
rating.
if they're terrible?
Oh. Anyway, do that thing.
Modern Warfare.
What about it?
Oh, he was just getting us back on track.
No, it didn't work.
Modern Warfare.
Right. But all of this said, the actual shooting mechanics in this game have this weird tendency to range wildly between extremely satisfying and like horrible and the worst thing in the whole world. And I think it has to do with the fact that it telegraphs almost no information about what the weapon you're carrying is actually capable of. Because you can make really obvious assumptions like, I have a shotgun. I probably can't kill that guy on the roof. But your shotgun can kill a guy from like probably 15 to 20 feet away, which is further than most shotguns in games and is more accurate to reality. But then you have like a host of probably like 37,000 different automatic rifles, all of which I have no idea what their like respective stats are. So I would just grab them and then fire a clip wildly into the air, hoping to hit people with it. I don't know. I don't know if everybody else even gave a shit, but I always try and come up with like optimal weapon loadouts. And
my go-to was the whatever rifle had the scope.
yeah,
Because basically every other rifle just felt like shit in comparison.
That's one thing that they actually do a lot of games do this, shooters that is, where you make a trade-off between your cool, awesome, advanced American rifle and like the shitty like AK-47 that you found on the ground that's worse in every way, but it's a lot easier to get bullets for.
Right.
From a gameplay perspective, I do like that as like a genuine trade-off because it makes your cool rifle like your like secret super ability that you bring out in desperate situations.
right.
And you try
with the noob tube.
Right. It also balances out like the combat situations a little bit, where playing optimally creates situations that are actually most of the time a little bit harder for you. Kind of in the same way that like people are super resistant to use potions in RPGs.
Right.
You like try really hard to conserve your special cool weapons in these games, and you can't have too many of those special cool ammunition in a game with 2 weapon slots. So.
Yeah. Well, you have 2 weapon slots, but you also have like 37 different kinds of tools for some reason, and it is like baffling because like on the PC it's mapped to basically buttons 1 through 9, or I'm sure it doesn't ever go that far, but at least up to 6 get used. And so anytime that there'd be like call in a drone strike, I'd be like and like put away my shotgun and like pull out a claymore, and I'm like, that's not right, hold on, and put it back, and the airstrike comes in, and I go to switch back to my weapon, and I've got like C4 in my hand, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, someone help. Like, this is really hard for no reason. And then you have 2 different kinds of grenades, and then you can carry 2 weapons, which at that point I feel like, why not just let him carry more weapons, because he's got everything else on the planet with him at the time. But I never really tried to conserve my ammo in this game, which was weird. Because I totally am that guy, especially in like a Halo game. But I am super not in this game for whatever reason. I don't know if you recall, there's a level where you like land and then you go up a hill and there's a bunch of houses in a village and you have to just like eliminate, you have to search all the houses for someone. And on the way up the hill, I came across a house where some people started coming out the doors. So I just posted up and just shot all of them with a sniper rifle. And I feel like there's like some scripted sequence where an unlimited number of people just kept coming out of the door until I got to a certain distance.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that too.
It's weird. And when I finally did get to that distance, I approached a pile of bodies that was like nearly traumatic to look at. Like,
yeah, I ran into a couple of circumstances where I would like be like, you know, camped down in a spot and just like shooting all the guys that were coming, and then like it would just stop, and like nothing would happen, like no one would go forward or nothing else would happen until I moved forward to a certain spot. Like that was really noticeable in this game. Like there were like trigger points for things to happen.
Yeah, like very obvious triggers, and it was really strange. And I think because of those, I always found myself most comfortable with the shotguns because I could literally just walk forward and just whenever somebody showed up, blast them and just keep moving. And he would just bypass all of the like set scripted events as you just like shot every individual person in a row and occasionally throw a flash grenade.
Yeah, and also I actually thought that there was just unlimited ammo for a while. Like I, for some reason, just didn't notice like the UI element that showed you your ammo at all.
Yeah. Well, and they always start you with a weapon that has like crazy amounts of ammo. Yeah.
And then like I just kept picking new guns up, and like I just never even thought about it.
Yeah. I do appreciate the ammo limit to a certain extent. I mean, in the same way that this works, the amount that this is like Halo is actually kind of shocking considering how different they are, like, aesthetically and even mechanically to some extent. But, like, all of the gun interaction works in almost the same way, with the difference of Call of Duty having, like, hundreds of guns that are all realistic and Halo having, like, 2 guns that are realistic. And that barely even counts as realistic because it's like a future setting. Mm-hmm. But yeah, because the same kind of thing always happened to me in those games where I would just kind of not pay attention to my ammo count unless it was like a weapon like the fuel rod cannon that they purposefully give you like 3 shots for. In this game, that version was like you would get like an RPG. Yeah. It would be bad. So fuck you.
The only like shooters I've ever really played were like Time Splitters as a kid, and then we played Doom, and if you want to count Splatoon,
you have to count Splatoon.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like that's like a third person game, you know.
Yeah.
So, I was wondering while I was playing this whether or not like this game was like influential in the way it like controlled or anything, or like groundbreaking in any way, because when I sat down to play it, it felt like it controlled exactly how I expected it to, and it's 11 years old.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if like this like did something that like everyone else copied or anything.
I can't speak for the console side of things, but PC games have been basically leaning on players to just know what to do in a first-person shooter, that they just don't change the controls.
Yeah.
Like, everything, pretty much since the dawn of time. On the 8th day, God said, alright, now you press R to reload, and either E or F is going to be your action key, but I'm groggy from waking up. Literally every game is WASD to move, space to jump, R to reload, mouse to look, left click shoots, right click alternate fire. Like, the fact that I can ramble off the controls and have it be accurate to 15 different games or more, and by or more I mean literally hundreds more, is just a testament to how like solid these controls have been in the history.
this game didn't create any kind of like crazy mechanical step-ups that were copied. This game is part of the stream of games copying the same mechanics for, God, at least in the console space, like since Halo 2 probably, after Halo had spent a little bit of time optimizing even their own controls. But yeah, it controls exactly how you expect it to everywhere else, because that's not what they're trying to do. As part of the reason they focus on aesthetics so much in set pieces is because the actual meat of the gameplay, like this Call of Duty 4 played identical to all the other CODs I've played, roughly. All the main differences were aesthetic differences or weird set pieces, but all the mechanical interaction is roughly the same. You're still just pointing at a thing and shooting at the thing. There's not a lot of choices. Like, I think Halo is a good contrast point to that, where Halo makes, because they're in the sci-fi setting and they have so much freedom, makes a lot of intentional choices in the enemy design and the setup of the actual conflicts you're encountering to force like actual saying actual thought seems a bit mean, but like in Halo there are enemies with shields that are hidden around the map with sniper rifles, and you have to like make decisions about like how am I going to get around the situation. And in Call of Duty, like that's not genuinely what they're prioritizing. What they're prioritizing is you constantly moving forward, tension in terms of things that are always in your face. It's not like there's never a puzzle to unravel. There's always just things to react to.
And that's a lot harder to do with like a realistic art style.
Yeah.
Because like you can't have just like the shield guy.
Well, because actually that's talking about this is actually such a good fucking point that you bring up about just like games and how their mechanics being so similar, you have to pick these certain things to differentiate them. Whereas, like you said, Halo has the Jackals, which are the shield guys. You can also map that basically 1-to-1 with something like Rainbow Six.
Yeah.
Right? So Rainbow Six is one that is heavily into, it's a much more cerebral shooter, and the way that they balance that is, comparatively make your character less tanky, like you can take fewer shots, and the enemy variety is something that's way more akin to what Doom was when it invented the genre and said, like, this is the person who you have a strategy for, and this is a different strategy for a different enemy.
Yeah.
And Call of Duty is so heavily rooted in what is like the twitchy reaction thing that became like arena shooters and these like basically skill shot based sort of tests of reflexes. It almost feels like it's a subgenre within a genre that feels very samey, especially during this era.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of people doing a lot of new things to shooters between like 2004 and 2010.
Yeah. Essentially, they've picked a mechanic set that's been time tested for 10 years before this game 10 years ago, and have invested and know that if you just like create a solid, polished base mechanical experience and only implement gameplay variety in like the cheapest, easiest to implement ways possible, press X to Y, you can minimize the amount of time that you spend on those kind of like grand reimaginings, like the scenarios in Rainbow Six or the weird enemy designs in Halo, and can instead throw billions of dollars into making everything beautiful and unique and standing out at, not the box office, but you know what I mean, at the GameStop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
The
Babbages, perhaps.
Nice sig reference.
I love it. No, and that emphasizes why levels like Death from Above and All Gilded Up stand out so much, because they are the levels that actually take a mechanical turn.
Yeah.
They make you do something different. And All Gilded Up in particular is basically like a movie. Yeah. Because all you're doing, you playing that level optimally, you take about 3 shots.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is just you sort of crouching around. And that, honestly, like the scene, there's no real difficulty to it.
Yeah.
But the scene where, like, the whole army marches over you and you just have to stay hidden, genuinely tense, genuinely very cool, genuinely distracted me from how bad the ground texture was, despite the fact I was looking directly at it the whole time. It was just really good design, like, of a way to take that mechanic set and put it there, but I feel like somebody said, we can't do more of this, players are going to get bored. And so the next level involves like a scene where you're like sprinting through like a city street and just like fighting off dogs that are attacking you, and it's just bonkers. Like I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that everyone knows about Call of Duty, and thus everyone has certainly everyone who's listening to this podcast has some kind of familiarity with the criticism and like popular discourse about Call of Duty, and that means everyone already knows that like you're not allowed to be bored is like the number one like since Modern Warfare,
right?
Absolute staple of not just this whole series but all series that are trying to copy it or ape it in some way. You are always doing a thing. Always. That's why all their story is forced into these like weird not overtures but like the intro sections, so you don't have to worry about like listening or like looking at something or waiting or being on an elevator. None of that. Just go, just continue to move.
Right. They put dialogue over the loading screens. They put like text flying everywhere.
Yeah.
So that like even the text isn't bored.
Yeah.
Like the text is energetic and has to fly everywhere. Yeah. It's such a strange I don't know, like I had to take breaks from this game.
Yeah.
Because it was just too like it wasn't even like adrenaline, it was just like my eyes needed to stop darting left and right for long enough for me to like regain consciousness.
Like compare this to Doom 2016.
I've been comparing this to Doom 2016 since we started talking about it. I don't know if you're aware.
In this way, Chad. In this way, jeez. That game had quiet.
Really good. Sorry, go on.
Had quiet moments. That game had times where you'd clear an area and things would just stop. And you would just like move on to the next zone or like look around for secrets or your shield power-ups and all that stuff. Like this game is faster than Doom. All of these games are faster than Doom. Yeah. Mechanically speaking, they just don't accent the speed as much. There's no up or down. There's just up. There's only up.
Yeah, Doom has more like I guess just level design.
Yeah.
Like it plays itself out more like a level rather than a hallway. And Doom's trailer is something that focuses on like it opens with somebody shooting a demon in the face and then proceeds to just escalate that and then ends with the logo on fire while more gunshots are heard in the background. But there's quiet moments in that game, whereas like a Call of Duty trailer has a similar sense of pacing but could just be a vertical slice from the game.
Yeah.
It's like, here's 3 minutes of uninterrupted gameplay and it is ready-made to be a trailer for the game. Mm-hmm. I kind of like it, honestly, but it doesn't kill the game for me.
No.
But man, oh man, when they get to actually slow things down, does this game actually shine?
If you're making a video game for people who are only ever going to play your game for an hour at a time anyway, you likely don't need to build in that many natural cool down moments in the gameplay.
Right.
Like you don't have to create that expectation if Daddy Milsim or whoever that man is, the 40-year-old guy who plays this game. If he's just gonna put it down after 40 minutes because he needs to let the dog out, then
yeah,
like it's designed to play like one level at a time or something.
Yeah.
Almost.
Potato chips.
Mm-hmm.
While we're on the subject of the mechanics and how they can hyper polish all of the actual shooting mechanics into just the most streamlined version, I'd like to call out a particular instance where they fucked it up.
Okay.
Yes, Chad.
Did you ever crouch in this game?
Occasionally.
Oh, I hate it so much. Actually, it might work better on a controller. Like, this actually seems like it might make more sense thinking about it. But if you wanted to crouch and then stand up, you have to press 2 different buttons, and I fucking hate it.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, there's a button to crouch, and then there's a button to go prone, and then there's a button to stand up, and that button is also your jump button. So, in order to do a maneuver that is, like, not even a thing you think about in another game, other than does this game use C or control for crouch, you have to be like... There are so many times when I just be like walking around, just like, and then hunker down or whatever, and then just sit there for a second while I'm like instinctively mashing on the control key and not being able to stand up. It's completely asinine. And there's another setting, like there's even settings, control settings in this game, specifically for crouching, to change it from toggle to hold, which makes it worse somehow. Because now you have to think about also holding down a key the whole time you want to remain crouched. And there's like kind of a half-assed stealth system in the game, so you do want to be crouched sometimes. Oh, it infuriates me to no end. Why can nobody figure out fucking crouching?
Yeah, that bothered me too, because I also, you would hit the space bar to like get out of the crouch, and I felt like I was doing it wrong. Like every time I'm like, there's got to be another way to get out of the crouch. But this is the way that I know.
There's one other way, which is to just go into a dead sprint.
Oh, to just run?
Yeah, which is even worse, because if you actually are trying to be stealthy, suddenly you're running, and it ruins everything. And
it's a personal problem, but I kept hitting control when I wanted to hit shift. So crouching when I wanted to run.
God, you're ruining your cred. Just all this cred is being shredded in front of us.
I've always had trouble typing like with keys you're supposed to hit with your pinky, so that's just like a thing.
Yeah,
for me.
I mean, I feel like that's a common problem. Like I remember, like if you see pictures of kids in the '90s playing video games, all of them have the fucking Windows key popped off of their keyboards, so you don't accidentally minimize the window.
Also, we all know that I have no shooter cred already. I'm not trying to hide it.
Yeah, no cred was at risk here. Yeah. He just said, I played Time Splitters and then Doom.
2016.
Yeah, which is like a 15-year gap. I don't think...
and Overwatch. Forgot to mention that.
You did play Overwatch.
Oh, whatever.
Yeah. Fuck Overwatch.
Whatever.
Call of Duty's the new shit.
Yeah.
I have one other stupid thing.
Okay.
I love it though. Yeah. Like a lot.
Okay.
During those few quiet moments, you ever listen for your footsteps?
Yes.
Yeah. You only hear them sometimes. I was playing with headphones on too, so it's not like it was a stereo separation issue. Your character takes 4 steps for every 1 footstep sound effect that occurs when walking. So which in my mind has this hilarious image of your character doing like a cartoon stealth walk where he's like stretching his leg way out every time. And it like the moment I noticed it, I could never stop hearing it. So it was the whole game of me just being like, man, this guy's got some long legs.
I'm glad your protagonist was heading downtown, Chad.
Should write a letter to the audio engineer.
Yeah, really,
or whoever is in charge of that.
You owe me some more footstep sound effects. At least 3.
I caught you cutting corners. Okay, another weird thing I noticed.
Good.
In that opening scene where you're in the car.
Yes, Andy?
The guy in the driver's seat's like talking the whole time, right? And he's like moving his head around. And I noticed, you look at the rear view mirror, the texture is just like a picture of his face that does not move at all.
It's just like his eyes too, which is so good.
Like he's looking at you in the mirror. That's just what it is, and it never changes. And that's another thing I just could not stop looking at.
Maybe he just does that for the intimidation factor. Maybe it's not a rear view mirror.
Oh yeah, it's just an actual picture.
It's a photograph of his face that he just put over the rearview
It's like
mirror.
a Big Brother situation.
To be fair, that whole sequence, like, you're never going faster than like 6 miles an hour. I doubt you need to be checking the mirrors to
Yeah,
make sure people aren't coming up behind you.
Yeah, but is that like the only car that's even there? It's like Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
They have like, I don't know, sheep.
Well, in that scene, which I didn't mention, I just want to briefly. Probably the best thing about that whole scene is the fact that there are like people around.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And the people are like reacting, and obviously it's all scripted and it's pre-programmed, and you can't interact with it in any way. Looks so fucking good with all those people, but then all you can focus on is a pair of eyes, just glaring at you from the rear view.
Never looking down at the road.
He's got it all memorized.
Never blinking.
Good.
So unless you had any like amusing audio visual glitches you wanted to get into, do we have final thoughts?
We've been through how absolutely run-of-the-mill that this game is mechanically and how much it works to try and make sure that there aren't, hiccups in that process of you going through that very time-tested mechanic set so they can focus their attention elsewhere. I hope how completely normal the mechanic set of this game is brings into relief why we like shooters so much that are not this game. When every single game was attempting to get a piece of the pie that was Call of Duty 4, and you can predict exactly the controls for every game that you play in advance, and when all of them have a vested interest to try and make sure that they don't branch out their design so that they can keep things grounded, gritty, and real, which means a few bullets will just kill anyone you look at.
Right.
Seeing something like Doom 2016 or like the Serious Sams or like Splatoon, where a lot of specific effort was put in to just removing every assumption about it that wasn't a video game.
Right.
Like, that's why that's so refreshing to us. And at least in my case specifically, that's why I love games that mix that up so much, is because we had a decade of every game trying to be some approximation of this. And because this game was putting its mechanic set secondary to its presentation, that means we had a decade of games not prioritizing themselves as games.
It was a rough time.
It was a rough time.
We did have Halo though.
I know, and Halo is good.
Yeah.
Halo is wonderful. Halo made...
And it also came out before this.
Yeah.
Well, that is true.
Or Star
But I'm just saying, during that period,
Yeah.
Halo games were still coming out and they were still good.
They were.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Uh,
games.
I don't even really know what to say. I know if I would have played this game when it came out, I would have fucking hated it.
Oh, for sure.
But playing it now, I can't really. It's like a quality made game. It's just everything that like it cares about and like wants to do is something I find unappealing. Like I really don't like that like modern warfare aesthetic, like Afghanistan in the desert, modern military uniforms, all earth tones. It just does not do anything for me. And on top of that, I've never really engaged that much with shooter mechanics. Like I've never even like touched a bow in like Skyrim or like Magic. Like range combat in games doesn't really do anything for me. Pointing and clicking at a thing, not my thing. Personally, so this game has the deck completely stacked against it in my book. But like I said, I can acknowledge that it is like well made though, but I don't really have much nuance to say about it because I'm me.
Yeah. No, realistically, you're spot on. The game spectacularly doesn't hold up over time because it was never meant to. It's a game that was meant to be consumed at the time, and it blew the doors off of people who wanted something to play that looked crazy and had them shooting stuff a lot, especially for console players, because I mean, this game gave love to console players who were shooter fans that just didn't really exist. It brought a lot more of the genre to that user base.
Yeah.
Additionally, as somebody that is me and not Andy or JJ, there's something inherently satisfying to me about just like looking at a dude with a single shot rifle and just like popping a sick headshot and being like, "Ooh, I'm a dope gamer. Hell yeah."
I hate you.
But lest I somehow manage to surprise anyone, the game is not that fucking enjoyable in the long run. It's something that I don't need to reiterate is well presented and then just bog standard from that point on. In order to give at least some kind of a surprise and something that I think people will not like me very much for, is that having played this game now and take the amount of time since its release into account when I say this, I liked this game significantly less than The Order 1886, which is a game that was like widely panned across the board.
I'm not going there.
And Modern Warfare is a game that everyone loved when it came out. A game that was technically worse is just so much more interesting than it. And I feel like there's a line there that they just ignored. That's really the thing. I feel like this game had the prowess to exceed in different areas and said, fuck them all. We exceed in one area and we exceeded it with flying colors and aeroplanes and bombs. All of the flying things.
Yeah, the flying colors of red, white, and blue.
These colors don't run, they fly. And they nailed it. And then they were like, we'll just paint that on. Pop Pop got him.
Yeah, they'll paint that on Pop Pop got him forever until the end of time.
Well, like I said, I'm actually interested in playing the ones where the games go off the rails. Because that seems imaginative and cool and the things that I wanted from this game.
Yeah.
But big ups to those 3 missions that I mentioned that were actually outstanding.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, turn your 3D sliders to max. Because we're going to be talking about The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask 3D on the Nintendo 3DS. Until that time, if you want to get a hold of us, all of our contact information is on noclippodcast.com. That's where you can find our old episodes, links to iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, all of the cool, fun places where we post our insightful, great, neat episodes. And after you listen to those and have your mind completely blown, give us a 5-star rating. iTunes, thumbs up on YouTube.
Tell all your friends.
Leave a comment, smash that motherfucking like button into oblivion. Detonate a tactical nuke on the like button and allow the fallout to irradiate the subscribe button. Crawl helplessly out of a downed helicopter and fall onto your face, breaking your neck in a tragic way onto the alert button so that you get notified of all of our new videos.
Pick up a casket full of all of your fallen brothers. Move it slowly
to the comment section.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
That was the best ending we ever did. I just mean like buckets of ice placed strategically around the room in order to cool it off.
That's actually something I'm surprised I never saw on an episode of Mythbusters.
Is that a myth?
No, I don't know. Temperature isn't a myth, Andy.
Oh.
The myth would be can you cool a room down by just putting buckets of ice in it? So you can see, like, obviously the answer is yes. It's
Right.
just like, is there any practical amount of ice that you can put?
That also does seem like a late stage Mythbusters
Yes,
episode.
exactly.
I remember I thought that the time that they died as like a concept was when they were like, because they would do like the myth of this, like the ice bullet that killed JFK. Like that's a myth. They tested it. They proved it wrong. Cool. But then they were like, a bull at a china shop. Will a bull really knock over some china? I'm like, that's not a myth. That's a saying. Nobody's disputing it. But then, of course, they made it interesting somehow because the bull actually avoided all of the china.
Yes, it did.
And I don't know how that happened. That seems like completely implausible.
Yeah, they went from testing myths to testing possibilities.
Yeah, just like anything.
Yeah.
They should have changed the name to Science.
Yeah.
Dumb Science with Jamie Heineman and Adam
Savage.
Sessler and Morgan Webb.
God damn it.